And what, exactly, is this supposed to be? The voice was sharp, laced with the kind of manufactured authority that comes from a fresh promotion and not enough experience to temper it. Captain Evans, his uniform a crisp landscape of digital camouflage, tapped a manicured finger on the faded, laminated card the old man had presented. The desert sun glinted off the silver bars on his collar, a stark contrast to the worn flannel shirt of the man standing before him. The old man, Jedediah Stone, didn't answer immediately. His eyes, the pale, washed-out blue of a winter sky, took in the scene with a placid calm that seemed to irritate the young officer even more. He looked from the captain's polished boots to the state-of-the-art security kiosk, then to the two young airmen flanking him, their faces carefully neutral masks of military discipline. Jed's gaze lingered for a moment on the long, slender rifle case resting on the passenger seat of his dusty, 1980s-era Ford pickup. "It's my identification," Jed finally said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, like stones shifting at the bottom of a riverbed. A slight southern drawl softened the edges of his words. Captain Evans let out a short, incredulous laugh. He held the card up to the light, as if it were a fossil from a bygone era. The photo showed a much younger man with the same steady eyes, but a harder jawline. The lamination was peeling at the corners, and the typed font was from a machine that had likely been scrapped decades ago. "This thing expired before I was born, Pops. It looks like something you won out of a cereal box. I need a valid, scannable, current government-issued ID." "It's still valid," Jed stated, not as an argument, but as a simple fact. "Special issuance. It doesn't expire." "Special issuance," Evans mocked, his voice rising in volume for the benefit of the airmen and the growing line of cars behind the old Ford. "Right. And I suppose that antique in your truck is a special issuance musket?" He gestured with his chin toward the worn leather and canvas case. "What's in the bag, old-timer? You bringing your hunting rifle to a high-security Air Force installation? This isn't a shooting range for hobbyists." Jed's hands, gnarled and thick with the history of 1,000 hard tasks, rested on the rolled-down window of his truck. He didn't seem fazed by the condescension. "I'm here for the Talon Strike demonstration. I was invited," Evans scoffed, tossing the ID back onto the dashboard of the truck. "Invited? The Talon Strike program is a Tier 1 briefing for active duty commanders and defense contractors. They don't send out invitations on parchment paper. Now, I'm going to give you one chance to turn this museum piece around and drive away before I have my men search your vehicle and detain you for attempting to access a federal installation with fraudulent credentials." One of the airmen, a young man named Riley with a thoughtful face, shifted his weight. He glanced at the old man's ID, then back at his captain. Something felt wrong. The quiet dignity of the old man stood in stark opposition to the captain's loud, preening aggression. The name on the card, Stone, J.D., and the faded seal of the Department of the Navy seemed to tickle a distant memory from a history briefing. "Captain," Jed said, his voice still infuriatingly calm, "if you just run the number on the back of the card, use extension 77. They'll clear it up." This was the final straw for Evans. To be given instructions by this relic, in front of his subordinates, was an intolerable breach of the universe's natural order. His face, already pink from the Nevada heat, deepened to a furious red. "I don't take orders from you. I am the authority here. You don't tell me how to do my job." He stepped closer, his posture aggressive, invading the old man's personal space. "Now, for the last time, get out of here, or I'll have you pulled out." Jed didn't move. His pale eyes simply watched the captain, their depths unreadable. It wasn't defiance, it was something else. Patience. An almost geological level of patience, as if he were a mountain watching a thunderstorm rage against its slopes, knowing it would eventually pass. "Sir," Airman Riley ventured, his voice quiet. "Maybe we should just make the call. It would only take a second." Evans whipped his head around, his glare venomous. "Are you questioning my command, Airman?" "No, sir," Riley said, his gaze dropping to the pavement. "Of course not, sir." "Good." Evans turned back to Jed, his swagger fully restored. "Your little friend here understands the chain of command. Something a civilian wouldn't get." He pointed a finger at Jed's chest. "You are delaying government operations. You are a potential security threat. I am now ordering you to step out of the vehicle and place your hands on the hood." He reached over, and put his hand on the handle of the rifle case. And we're going to see what's in this bag. The moment the captain's fingers touched the worn leather, a flicker of something new appeared in Jed's eyes. It wasn't anger. It was memory. The hot, dry air of the desert gate dissolved. The smell of asphalt and exhaust fumes was replaced by the scent of damp earth and rotting vegetation. The captain's sharp voice faded into the background, replaced by the incessant hum of insects in a triple canopy jungle somewhere in Southeast Asia, a lifetime ago. He felt the familiar weight of the rifle, not in its case, but in his hands. The cold steel, the worn wooden stock he had customized himself. He remembered the feel of the trigger, the controlled exhale, the absolute stillness required to make a shot that no one believed was possible. A shot that had saved a dozen men. A shot that no one could ever know about. The memory was so vivid, so complete, that he could feel the phantom pressure of the scope against his eye socket. He blinked. The jungle vanished. The oppressive Nevada sun was back. Captain Evans was now tugging at the rifle case, a sneer on his face. "What's the matter, Grandpa?" Lost in a daydream. He gave a sharp pull, trying to wrench the case from the passenger seat. Jed's hand shot out, not with aggression, but with an impossible speed that belied his age. His gnarled fingers clamped down on the captain's wrist. It wasn't a threatening grip, but it was as firm and unyielding as granite. Evans froze, shocked by the sudden movement and the surprising strength. He tried to pull his wrist away, but it was like trying to move a statue. "Let go of the case, son," Jed said, his voice no longer calm, but carrying a low, dangerous vibration. It was the sound of a deep engine turning over. Evans, his authority now physically challenged, was incensed. Assaulting an officer. "That's it. You're done," he shouted to his men. "Cuff him. Get him on the ground." The other airmen moved forward hesitantly, but Riley remained frozen. His mind was racing. Stone. Special issuance. Department of the Navy. The pieces were clicking together from a dusty corner of his brain. A mandatory lecture on military heritage he'd mostly slept through. There was a story, a legend, about a man from the old days. A ghost operator. A name you never said aloud. While Evans struggled futilely against Jed's grip, Riley took a half-step back, pulling his phone from his pocket, keeping it low and out of the captain's line of sight. His fingers flew across the screen, not making a call, but sending a text to the one person he knew who might understand. The crusty old master sergeant who ran the security forces command post, a man who had seen everything. The message was short and frantic. "Sir, situation at Northgate. Captain Evans is trying to arrest an old vet. Name is Stone, Jedediah. He has a faded Navy special ID. Says he's here for Talon strike. Please advise. Urgent." Evans finally ripped his wrist free, a red mark blooming on his skin. He was panting slightly, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. On the ground. "Now," he shrieked, his voice cracking. He put his hand on Jed's shoulder and shoved. It wasn't a hard shove, more for dramatic effect than actual force, but Jed was an old man. His balance, solid a moment ago, was compromised. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, and fell. He didn't cry out. He landed on the hot asphalt with a dull thud, his fall broken slightly by his arm. The world seemed to go silent for a moment. The only sound was the idling engine of the old Ford truck and the distant whine of a jet. The small crowd of onlookers gasped. Pushing an elderly man to the ground, veteran or not, was a line that had just been crossed. Airman Riley's face went pale with horror. He had seen enough. Just as the other airman reluctantly produced a pair of handcuffs, Riley's phone buzzed in his hand. A one-word reply from the master sergeant, "Stall." A second later, the command post radio on Riley's belt crackled to life, the master sergeant's voice bypassing all normal channels, using an emergency override that made every radio within a mile chirp. "All units at Northgate, hold your positions. Do not, I repeat, do not touch the civilian. Stand down immediately. Acknowledge." Evans, about to enjoy his moment of triumph, froze. He stared at the radio on Riley's hip as if it had sprouted a second head. "What is the meaning of this?" he sputtered. Before Riley could answer, a new sound cut through the air. It started as a low thrumming and rapidly grew into the percussive, ground-shaking roar of helicopter rotors. Two sleek, black HH-60 Pave Hawks, the kind used by special operations forces, were bearing down on their position, flying far lower and faster than regulations allowed. They weren't heading for the flight line. They were heading directly for the gate. Simultaneously, from down the base's main thoroughfare, came the piercing wail of sirens. A convoy of 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans, lights flashing, sped toward them, weaving through traffic with terrifying precision. Captain Evans stared, his mouth agape. This wasn't a response. This was an invasion. An entire security incident response for one belligerent old man? It made no sense. The lead Suburban screeched to a halt just yards from the scene, blocking the entrance completely. The helicopters didn't land but hovered menacingly overhead, kicking up a storm of dust and grit that sent people scrambling for cover. The doors of the Suburbans flew open and a half-dozen commandos in full combat gear, armed with short-barreled rifles, fanned out, creating a secure perimeter. They moved with a fluid, terrifying efficiency that made the base security forces look like children playing dress-up. They ignored Captain Evans entirely. They ignored everyone. Their focus was on the old man slowly pushing himself up from the ground. The rear door of the lead vehicle opened. Out stepped a man who radiated an aura of absolute command. He was tall, ramrod straight, and his uniform bore the 4 silver stars of a full general. On his chest was a galaxy of ribbons, a testament to a long and decorated career. It was General Marcus Thorne, the commander of the entire Air Combat Command, one of the most powerful men in the United States military. Captain Evans felt a cold dread wash over him, so intense it felt like his blood was turning to ice. He snapped to attention, his hand flying up in a salute so fast he nearly dislocated his shoulder. General Thorne. Captain Evans, sir. We had a security situation, but I have it under control. General Thorne didn't even glance at him. He strode past Evans as if he were a piece of furniture, his eyes locked on the old man brushing dust from his flannel shirt. The entire gate, the base, the world, seemed to hold its breath. The general stopped 2 feet in front of Jedediah Stone. The commandos stood like statues. The helicopters roared overhead. General Thorne's back was ramrod straight, his expression one of profound solemnity. Then, in a move that shattered Captain Evans's entire understanding of the military universe, he brought his hand up in the sharpest, most respectful, most immaculate salute Evans had ever witnessed. It was a salute reserved for the president, for a fallen hero at a funeral, for the flag itself. He held the salute, his voice booming over the sound of the rotors, clear and ringing with a reverence that bordered on worship. Commander Stone. Sir, it is an honor. Jed simply nodded, the pale blue eyes holding the general's gaze. He slowly, deliberately, returned a civilian's version of the gesture, a slight nod of his head and a touch of his fingers to his forehead. Marcus, you're making a scene. General Thorne finally dropped his salute, a look of deep concern on his face. He noticed the scuff on Jed's elbow and the dust on his back. His expression, which had been reverent, hardened into something terrifying. It was a cold, quiet fury that was far more frightening than any shouting could ever be. He turned his head slowly, his gaze falling upon Captain Evans, who was still standing at a quivering, forgotten salute. Captain, General Thorne said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low, calm tone. You have 30 seconds to explain to me why my guest, a living legend and a national treasure, is on his hands and knees on the asphalt of my base. Evans's mind went completely blank. Commander Stone? The general had called him sir. The salute. The helicopters. The commandos. It was a nightmare. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I'm waiting, Captain, the general said, his voice like chipping ice. Sir, He had no valid ID, sir. Evans stammered, his words tumbling out in a pathetic rush. It was old, expired. He was uncooperative. He had a concealed weapon. I was following protocol, sir. Security procedures. Protocol. General Thorne took a step toward Evans, and the young officer physically flinched. You think you know protocol? The general's voice was a controlled roar now. Airman, he barked, pointing at Riley, who was standing stiff as a board. What is this man's name? Stone, Jedediah, sir. Commander, retired, Riley answered, his voice clear despite his fear. Thorne nodded. Stone, Jedediah. Let me illuminate you. Captain, since you seem to be incapable of recognizing greatness when it's standing right in front of you. Asking politely for entry, he gestured back toward Jed, who was now leaning against his truck, watching the proceedings with a detached, almost weary expression. You see this man? The general boomed, his voice carrying across the now silent gate. This man is Commander Jedediah Stone. Does that name mean anything to you, Captain? Evans shook his head dumbly. Of course it doesn't. They don't teach you real history anymore. They teach you theories and PowerPoints. This man was a founding member of the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You probably know it by its more common name, SEAL Team 6. He didn't just join it, Captain. He built it. He wrote the doctrine. He developed the tactics that our Tier 1 operators still use to this day. A collective gasp went through the assembled crowd of onlookers. SEAL Team 6 was the stuff of myth, the tip of the spear. His identification card, the general continued, his voice dripping with contempt as he pointed at the faded laminate on the dashboard, is one of 7 ever issued. It's called an Omega Pass. It grants the bearer unrestricted, unquestioned access to any Department of Defense facility on the planet at any time. It doesn't have an expiration date because the service of men like this never expires. The fact that you don't recognize it is a failure of your training. The fact that you disrespected it is a failure of your character. General Thorne paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Evans looked like he was about to be physically sick. You mentioned a weapon, Thorne said, his tone turning even colder. He walked over to the truck and gestured to the rifle case. You see this case? Inside it is a Remington 700 rifle. To you, it's an antique. To the special operations community, it is Excalibur. In 1979, during a hostage crisis that has never been declassified, Commander Stone used that rifle to make a shot from a moving helicopter at night, in a storm, at a distance of over 1,800 yards. A shot that experts to this day say is physically impossible. He made that shot and saved the lives of 3 captured CIA officers. He received the Navy Cross for that action, but it was awarded in a locked room with no witnesses, and the citation is buried in a vault so deep you'd need a shovel and a decade to find it. The general was now standing inches from Evans's face. He is here today, at my personal and explicit invitation, to demonstrate that very same impossible shot for the Talon Strike development team. We are spending $12 billion on a new computerized sniper system trying to replicate what this man can do with a 40-year-old rifle and the grace of God. He is not a hobbyist, Captain. He is the standard by which all other marksmen are measured. He is a ghost, a myth, a legend. And you put your hands on him. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the whirring of the helicopter blades. Captain Evans's face had gone from red to a ghastly, waxy white. His career, his future, his entire sense of self-worth was evaporating in the desert heat. General, Jed's quiet voice cut through the tension. Marcus, that's enough. Thorne turned, his entire demeanor softening instantly as he looked at his old mentor. Jed, he disrespected you. He pushed you. He's a boy, Marcus, Jed said, his voice gentle. A young officer, full of pride. We were all like that once. He was trying to do his job, just doing it badly. Let it go. The grace of the gesture was more damning than any punishment. To be forgiven so easily by the man he had so thoroughly humiliated was the final, crushing blow for Evans. General Thorne looked at Jed, then back at the trembling captain. He sighed, the fury draining from his face, replaced by a profound disappointment. Your career in the Air Force is over, Captain Evans, he said, his voice now flat and devoid of emotion. Not because you made a mistake. We all make mistakes. It's over because of the arrogance that led you to it. You saw an old man in a flannel shirt, and you saw a target for your ego. You didn't see the man. You didn't see the service. You failed the most fundamental test of an officer, to lead with judgment and respect. You'll be reassigned to a desk in Thule, Greenland, where you will spend the next year inventorying parkas. After that, I will accept your resignation. Master Sergeant, he called out to the man on Riley's radio, have him escorted to the base commander's office. His command is revoked, effective immediately. 2 of the commandos stepped forward and gently but firmly took Captain Evans by the arms, leading him away like a man walking to his own execution. He didn't resist. General Thorne turned to Airman Riley, whose face was a mixture of terror and awe. "Airman, what's your name?" "Riley, sir." "Airman First Class." "Riley," the general said, a rare smile touching his lips. "You showed judgment and initiative today. You respected your elders. You knew something was wrong, and you acted. That's what a real officer does. I'll be speaking with your commander. Expect a promotion and a spot at the officer training school, if you want it." Riley was speechless, only managing a choked, "Thank you, sir." Thorne then walked back to Jed, placing a hand on his old friend's shoulder. "Come on, Ghost. Let's get you out of this, son. We have a lot of young hotshots with billion-dollar toys who need to see what a real master can do." An hour later, on a remote digital firing range, a crowd of 100 of the military's best and brightest stood in hushed silence. At one end of the range, a single, impossibly small target, no bigger than a dinner plate, was set up 2,000 yards away, shimmering in the heat haze. Jedediah Stone, now dressed in a simple flight suit provided by the general, lay on the ground. He wasn't using the advanced scopes or the computerized wind readers. He lay behind the old Remington 700, its wooden stock smooth with age. He closed his eyes for a moment, his breathing slowing until it was almost imperceptible. He wasn't looking at the target. He was feeling the world. The subtle shift of the wind, the humidity, the angle of the sun. He opened his eyes. He took a single, slow breath, let half of it out, and the rifle cracked, a single, sharp report that echoed across the desert. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the voice of the spotter came over the loudspeaker, strained with disbelief. "Target. Target is neutralized. Direct hit. Center mass." A wave of spontaneous applause broke out among the assembled officers and engineers. They weren't just clapping for the shot, they were clapping for the man, for the living proof that experience, humility, and quiet dedication were more powerful than any technology. Jed just pushed himself up slowly, a small, knowing smile on his face. He patted the old rifle, his partner through a lifetime of silent service. He had nothing to prove, but sometimes a lesson needed to be taught. It was a lesson about respect, a lesson that the greatest strength is often found in the quietest souls, and that the heroes who shape our world are rarely the ones who seek the spotlight. They are the ones who show up in old trucks with faded IDs, their greatness hidden in plain sight, waiting for those with the wisdom to see. The stories of men like Jedediah Stone are the foundation of our freedom, and it's by sharing them that we ensure their legacy and the values they represent are never forgotten. If you believe that these stories of quiet heroism deserve to be told, subscribe and become part of keeping their legends alive.